Is Congress the broken branch? Some people think so. And they think so because they look at Congress and they see that it can't operate very efficiently. They see that Congress is not responding to some of the nation's problems. Why can't we fix the immigration system, for example? That's often thrown out. How come we can't? How come we have such a large national debt? Can't we fix those problems? Some would argue that Congress is too far distant from the American people. Some would argue that Congress is giving its power to the executive branch. And in this way, Congress is not operating as the founders might have expected. But the reform impulse, the criticisms of Congress don't always reside in expectations that the founders had about Congress. Sometimes they reside in this notion that Congress should operate much more efficiently than it was designed to do. This comes out of the sort of Woodrow Wilson school of thought, the idea that the Congress needs to be very responsive to big problems that are facing the country. In particular, Congress should be responsive to the president's ideas about what the country should be doing.
I think Congress is damaged. I think hyperpartisanship has weakened the institutional networks that once existed. I think the 24-hour media cycle that sort of reports only the most sensational elements of what's going on in the political process has caused the public to question what Congress is doing. I think broken is too strong a word. Congress still has so much potential to do so much good. And when Congress works together, when the House and Senate work together, when Republicans and Democrats work together, they really are able to accomplish phenomenal things. This is an enormous country. The fact that we have had the same Constitution for more than 200 years, the fact that we are able to accomplish anything ever is remarkable. And I really think that Congress has lost its way. I think that the public's expectations of Congress are disconnected from the reality of what the Constitution requires and what politics will permit. And I think that the media are complicit in causing the public not to understand how Congress really actually works. I've worked in Congress. Virtually every member of Congress and every congressional staff member is there working 18-hour days because they believe in what they're doing. They want to do good things for their constituents. They want to serve their country, and they want to help improve people's lives. And to me, being inside an institution where you see that makes it impossible to think that it's broken. Can Congress do better? Absolutely. Must Congress do better? Absolutely. I think if Congress continues to fight internally, it strengthens the executive branch. It gives the courts more power than what was originally intended. And so I'd like to see Congress functioning more fully, but I don't think it's broken.
So I think it's important to kind of look at this question of the broken branch, from the standpoint of what the founders might have expected of Congress in the first place. And as we look at Congress and we think about the bicameral nature of Congress, the difficulty in passing laws, what we see essentially is that founders created a system of lawmaking which should be deliberative, which should take time, and would not happen very quickly, particularly in contrast to, say, the executive branch, which was set up essentially for the president to move with dispatch in the case of emergencies and the like. But we do need to take this criticism seriously, because in poll after poll after poll, when people are asked what they think of Congress, they say Congress, the institution, is fine, but the performance of Congress is very poor. And so you have somewhere between 10, 12, 19, 20% of Americans on any given week asked by a Gallup poll that say they approve of Congress. That means the vast majority of people are saying they disapprove of Congress. And Madison, I think, was concerned in general about making certain that the Congress at least had legitimacy in the eyes of the public. And so we have to take seriously concerns about the way Congress is functioning. But beyond that, it's really difficult to enact reforms in the United States Congress that would serve one function without taking away from another one. If you think about the Congress as a lawmaking body and a body that makes laws and a body that represents people, you can do something to improve the lawmaking function, but it might take away from the representative function. You might require Congress to be in session longer. Maybe that'll improve its chances of actually looking more closely at the laws. But as soon as you do that, members of Congress will say, now I don't have enough time for my constituents. And so you begin to see that reforming Congress is always a dicey proposition. And what we know historically is that when Congress tries to reform itself, right, it doesn't always hit the target. Because what happens is it tends to add new rules on top of old rules. And those old rules never really go away. And so it's really difficult sometimes to fix the United States Congress. I think it all kind of comes back in some ways to the founding itself and to the Constitution itself. Congress, the representative body, essentially is 435 individual House members and 100 individual senators representing their constituents. It's a big country. It's a diverse country. It's a country that doesn't by itself find consensus very easily. We send representatives to Washington to represent our views, the views of conservatives in some states, liberals in other states, the interests of agricultural communities, suburban communities, urban communities, coastal communities, middle of the country communities. It's a big, diverse country, and Congress is the place where all of these representatives come and reflect these individual interests, needs, perspectives, and they bring those to bear on national legislation. Then there's Congress, the lawmaking body. That's a collective institution with all these rules and structures and institutions, and their job is to try to bring about consensus. So it's no wonder that process, that lawmaking process, is going to have some conflicts embedded in it. And it's the interesting thing that, 90% of incumbents tend to get returned to office. So individual representatives seem to be doing a pretty good job in the eyes of the American people. And yet at the same time, it's hard to get 20% of Americans to approve of the way Congress is handling its job. So in many ways, the struggles that Congress deals with today are a function of the institution that the founders themselves created. It takes on a different form as new problems come up. But in a sense, the problems of Congress exist really at the beginning, where the founders created this legislative body, which is designed both to represent people and also to try to make laws.
I can see why people are skeptical of Congress right now. There's no doubt that Congress has especially poor poll ratings right now, public approval ratings. It is also the case that that skepticism of Congress runs throughout American history. So there are two political scientists, Hibbing and Thiesmorse, John Hibbing and Elizabeth Thiesmorse, who they wrote a book called Congress as Public Enemy, which sounds a lot like the Mann Ornstein Broken Branch thesis. But part of what they argued is that Americans say we like democracy, but we don't like actually seeing it. And so what we don't like about Congress is the fact that it's especially visible instances of negotiation, compromise, trade-offs, all the things we say we like but don't want to see. And so Hibbing and Thiesmorse say the solution to this is more public education about what democracy really is, what it looks like. And I think they're right about that, because it's not that there isn't this kind of trade-off and negotiation and compromise that happens in the other branches. It just happens more out of sight. And to the extent that we say what we really want is not to see that at all, what we're essentially saying that we want is something that moves us towards autocracy. So I think we need to recognize that there are certainly some things Congress has done to make itself less palatable. There are certain things that Congress could do, and even that individual members could do to increase their branch's standing, and I wish they would. But it is also the case that there are certain things that Americans need to do to understand our institutions and to understand that what might look ugly at first glance is actually the proper functioning of the institution. And to the extent that we punish them for behaving that way, that's actually to our own detriment.
you.